All right, congratulations. You've made an offer on a house. It was accepted. Your mortgage lender approved the deal. You're home free, right? Well, not so fast, because mortgage approval is still subject to a number of conditions. The most understandable one is the fact that the buyer has to keep his job, has to keep the same income, can't change his credit standing. So, for example, between now and the possession day, you shouldn't go out and buy a new car and put it on a credit plan. All these things can affect whether or not the lender will actually give you the money at time of closing. Another big one is that your purchase is subject to you being able to get insurance. I mean, let's face it, if you're putting 5% down, the bank is going to own 95% of that house. So they want to protect their investment. So you have to be able to get insurance. 99% of the times, that's not going to be a problem. However, there are three things that home insurance companies absolutely hate. One is knob and tube wiring. Another one is aluminum wiring. And the third one is wood stoves and fireplaces. Let's look at the dangers or the pitfalls of each of these. Let's take a look at the first of these three items, which is knob and tube wiring. What is it? It was the standard wiring method used around the turn of last century. I'm not talking 2000, I'm talking about 1900s. Essentially and systemically, there's nothing wrong with it. It was perfectly fine and safe way to wire houses. However, it's very old. If you encounter live knob and tube wiring, it's likely 70 or 80, sometimes over 100 years old. Now, thinking back on the way houses were built and insulated back in the 1900s, 1920s, quite often exterior walls were insulated with newspaper clippings, wood shavings, and sawdust. So that insulated wire was exposed to all the elements, heat in the summer and extreme colds in the winter. And over 7, 8+ decades, that insulation is going to crack and peel and expose the wire underneath, which of course creates a fire hazard. So for that reason, insurance companies really don't like this type of wiring. So what is the remedy for this type of wiring? There's really only one solution, and that is complete replacement. And depending on how large the home is and how much knob and tube wiring remains, it could be anywhere from as little as $5,000, $6,000, all the way up to, I've seen it, over $30,000 for 3-story homes. Now, when you're dealing with insurance companies, they fall into three different categories that I've seen so far. Some still agree to insure the home, but at a premium. A home that might have cost you $1,200 to insure can now cost you more than double that. Other companies shy away from insuring this home at all, so you won't be able to get it at all. And yet others, and this is a more common one now, agree to insure the home for the first 30 days while you're living there. That 30 days will give the new owner the time to replace all the wiring, which again costs anywhere from $5,000, $6,000 to many tens of thousands of dollars. So if you're lucky, you'll get an insurance company that'll cover you with an increase in premium, costing you, several $1,000s more each year. If you're unlucky, you won't get coverage at all. And if you don't get coverage, you don't get the mortgage. And if you don't get the mortgage, you lose the house and your deposit. Check out Winnipeg's Real Estate Podcast for the latest news, updates, and tips for home buyers, sellers, and owners in any market. If you're watching this as a slideshow, just click on the mobile phone picture or download my free apps available for Android and iOS devices by clicking the icons at the bottom of the screen. Missing an episode could be hazardous to your wealth. Now let's take a look at the issue of aluminum wiring. If your home was built between around 1960 to 1976, there is a chance that it contains aluminum wiring. What happened in the early 1960s was that copper prices went through the roof, and builders, in an effort to save money, switched from copper wiring to aluminum. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with aluminum. It's still being used today in warehouses, large industrial projects. Manitoba Hydro uses it. It's totally safe if left alone. The problem arises when homeowners tinker with it. So imagine this house was built in 1970 and a subsequent owner in the mid-90s decides that the light switches are outdated. Maybe he wants to update some of the light fixtures. And he goes to the local hardware store and he discovers that a light switch, which costs 99 cents in a copper configuration, costs $10 in the aluminum configuration. The reason for that is that the mass production of copper light switches and receptacles is able to keep the prices down, whereas aluminum is much more rare receptacle or rare switch, prices go up. So now the homeowner trying to update their home are faced with, do we spend $10 per switch? Do we spend 99 cents per switch? You can clearly understand what happens. The aluminum wiring that's in the walls is now hooked up to copper-rated devices. Aluminum and copper are very dissimilar. They heat and cool at different rates. And what happens over the years is they work themselves loose and creating loose connections and loose contacts. Loose contacts produces sparks, which creates potential for fire. So how do you fix that? Well, there are two ways. The cheaper one is called mitigation. That's where an electrician goes through the house and checks every receptacle and every switch and makes sure that the wiring that leads from that switch is in copper and then pigtailed to the aluminum wiring, which is in the walls. That's just properly connected with proper morettes to make sure that they don't work themselves loose. I'll say that's the cheaper method, and your average bungalow can probably be done around $1,500 to $2,000. The more expensive method is complete rewiring of the house, which again, much like knob and tube wiring, will run you in the tens of thousands of dollars. So what kind of reaction will you get from insurance companies? Well, some, fewer all the time, still agree to insure the property as is. But your options will be fewer, likely your costs will be higher. Now, other insurance companies will demand mitigation of some form, whether it's going to be the cheaper mitigation or the complete rewire of the house. And much like knob and tube, many of them will give you 30 days to get it done. So they'll give you an insurance for the first month while you're living there, but then you're going to have to get an electrician to rewire the house and give you a certificate, or mitigate and give you a certificate. Check out our smart real estate newsletter. What's so smart about it? Every 2 weeks, you'll receive an email with links to 10 different interesting articles about real estate, home renovations, selling and buying tips, and other home-related topics. As you read the ones which interest you, the system learns your preference over time, and the next email you get will have more of what you like. Smart. We keep your information safe and private, we'll never sell your email address, and of course you can unsubscribe anytime. Give it a shot. Subscribe now. Let's turn our attention to the last item on the list. That's fireplaces and wood stoves. What's wrong with them? Well, wood stoves in particular are subject to certain codes that have changed over the years. So if you have a wood stove that was installed 20 years ago, it may no longer meet the current fire code, which requires heat shielding and safety zones around the stove to prevent it from causing fires. Combustibles must be kept a certain distance away. So for example, if you have a wood stove and carpeting leads up too close to it, that's probably not going to meet current codes. Older fireplaces, built in the 60s and earlier, may have clay-lined chimneys, which are subject to cracking and crumbling. Now, I hate to say it, I learned this the hard way, that where an owner used that fireplace and got a real nice big fire going, and it apparently cracked the clay liner. Cracked liners lead to a fire hazard and possibly carbon monoxide dangers as well. Newer fireplaces have metal chimneys. They might be okay. Insurance companies might be good with them, but you'll still have to inspect them and clean them on a regular basis. So how will insurance companies react to this? Well, in the cases of wood stoves, some insurance companies just won't touch them, won't insure them at all. So you can buy the house, but they'll say that wood stove has to be either decommissioned, they might ask you to remove it from the house, or at the very least they'll say, if you use it, your insurance is void. As far as fireplaces go, insurance companies will demand stringent inspections, annual cleaning, And if it's an older fireplace that has one of those clay linings that has been damaged, you may not be able to use that fireplace. Now, of the three issues, knob and tube, aluminum, and fireplaces, this is the one that's least likely to kill the deal, but it'll kill your mood. Because if you've bought that house to have a nice fireplace or a wood stove in the basement, wherever, you may not be able to use it. And that's going to be a mood killer. So be sure to know what you're getting into. So now we're saying, what about a seller's responsibility to disclose all these issues? Yes, a seller has a responsibility to disclose, but remember, that does not mean advertise or volunteer. A seller must answer direct questions honestly, assuming that they know. So for example, in the case of aluminum wiring, a house was built in the 70s, a seller buys it in 2010, has used it for 10 years, but has not made any upgrades or changes. The house has been updated before he bought it. He or she has just lived in it for the last 10 years. It is not unreasonable to believe that that seller may not know whether the house contains aluminum. He or she may not just be aware of it. As a buyer, it's important to ask the right questions, but don't always rely on the seller's answers. Also, just because the current seller has insurance does not mean that the next owner will be able to get insurance. There is such a thing as grandfathering, where an insurance company will say to the current seller, yeah, we'll cover you, but a new buyer has to fall under new rules. So buyers need to work with an experienced and knowledgeable agent who knows to ask the right questions. And if the proper answers aren't forthcoming, that agent should know what the next steps are to verify this information. And I'd like to give a shout out to a brand new charity thrift store. That's Annie's Attic Thrift Store and Cat Cafe at 1560 Main Street in Winnipeg. Spacious, clean, well laid out store with everything from new and gently used clothing and shoes to household goods, small appliances, toys, and pet supplies. Inside, enjoy some great tasting coffee with fabulous baked goods from Nichelle's Cakes while you visit with the furry four-legged friends in the cat room. 100% of proceeds go to support Darcy's Animal Rescue Center, which helps save nearly 1,000 cats and dogs each year in our city. When you're in the neighborhood, come check out Annie's Attic Thrift Store and Cat Cafe, open daily from 11 to 6, except Sundays when they're closed. That's at 1560 Main Street, and please tell them both sent you. Are you looking to buy a house or a condo? Here's the recommended process to follow. First, find a realtor. Because a real estate agent is involved in nearly every step of the process. He or she can make recommendations as to mortgage specialists, lawyers, home inspectors, moving companies, insurance companies, and most of these services will ask questions that only your realtor can answer. Next, prepare a budget that includes extra expenses. Home ownership is about more than just paying the mortgage. Make sure you have money to pay other bills like electricity, heat, water, taxes, etc. Next, make sure you know what closing costs are all about. In addition to the down payment, you'll also need about 2 to 3% of the value of the house to cover things like land titles tax, home insurance, legal fees, and possibly taxes at the time of purchase. Next step is to apply for pre-approval by a mortgage lender. Now, don't get pre-approved by 2, 3, or 4 of them. Ask your real estate agent for a recommendation of a mortgage lender that would work for you. Get the pre-approval in writing and also get a rate guarantee that's good for 90 to 120 days. This is a win-win situation because if rates go up, you're locked in or guaranteed the rate that you were quoted. And if rates go down, your rate will go down. So it's a win-win. Next, work with your real estate agent to look at the houses that are in your price range and meet your criteria. Find a house that's just right for you. Don't overspend, but also don't buy a house that you're going to outgrow in a year or so. If at all possible, get a home inspection. And I say if at all possible because sometimes in very hot markets, you might be competing against other people. Talk to your real estate agent about the wisdom of putting in an offer without a home inspection. And that's it. If you're interested in buying a house or a condo in Winnipeg, give me a call anytime. That's Bo Kaufman, Remax Performance Realty, 204-333-2202.